Yo, what up guys? Rygo here from Kite, and today we're going to do another list for you, and we're going to do 5 tips on how to extend the life of your kite. And hey, don't forget to click that eye icon in the upper right hand corner of your screen, and I'll include a link to our Kiteboarding Knowledge Center where you can check out this article or loads more content on kiteboarding trick tips, a travel guide, hydrofoiling knowledge center, and so much more. Alright, so my first tip would be don't store your kite in extreme temperatures. So a pretty good example is this room right here. It's actually a pretty bad place to store your kite, and I just had it set up here to get ready for filming. So another good example of this would be like the trunk of your car, and you really wouldn't want to store your kite there just because it can get really hot, and what'll happen is it'll wear down on the material, it'll wear down on the control bar and things like that. Imagine like a rubber band. When it gets really hot and really cold over time, that's going to get brittle. Same thing can happen to your kite, so you just want to keep it inside the house, in the basement, somewhere cool and dry, out of the sun, things like that. The next tip is you never want to leave your kite beating on the sand. So when you lay it out in the sun and the sand is whipping across it, or even one of the trailing edges is kind of flapping in the wind against the sand, that's almost like sandpaper, and that's over time really gonna wear your kite down. So anything you can do to stop that sand whipping on the kite, if you're gonna be going out for a bit and you might grab a beer or something with friends and your kite's sitting there while you're on a deck at the beach, just, you know, make sure you throw some sand on the trailing edge, something like that. Anything you can to keep the material from whipping across the sand. And the third tip is actually pretty similar to the second one, and that is don't self-launch your kite. So anytime you have the opportunity to ask somebody to launch you, aside from the fact that you get to know more people on the beach, it's better for your kite if you don't drag it across the sand all the time. And some beaches have rocks, shells, things that might tear your kite, so obviously there's going to be times when you might have to self-launch, but anytime you can avoid self-launching, you're gonna extend the life of your kite. Tip number 4. So again, this kind of just goes along with general storage. So after your session, make sure your kite is dry. So you really wanna keep it cool and dry, especially if you're storing it for long periods of time. So I mentioned you could keep your kite in a basement, but if you put your kite away when it's wet in a basement, probably gonna get mildew or mold, the colors can bleed, so just make sure you lay the kite out, let it completely dry before you store it. And same thing actually if you're gonna leave it in your car over the weekend or something like that, just make sure that that kite is dry. And this might not seem like that big of a deal, but over time these kind of things do start to add up. So after like a 5, 6, 7 year period, you know, if you do maintain your kite and practice these things, it's gonna last a lot longer and stay crispier. And tip number 5 is just packing your kite right. So most of us know how to roll a kite and fold it into the bag, but if you fold your kite, it's gonna stay crispier longer. And over a 5 year period, realistically, this really doesn't matter. But if you're that person who is going to sell your kite after a year, 2 years, even 3 years later, this is going to maintain that crispy feel in the kite a lot longer. And we're actually going to demonstrate this one for you. So I'm going to pack up my kite for you and show you how this is done. So the trick here is just to make sure that everything is even, shake all the sand off the kite. I like to line up the leading edge and the trailing edge, and then I try to fold along the same place every time. And this isn't a hard fold. You want to leave a little bit of softness to the corners as you're rolling it over. But the idea here is to not roll every little piece of fabric. You're only rolling on the creases where you're folding the kite. And then from here, I'll just wipe off any excess sand, shake the kite as necessary, make sure there's no water or anything on it. And then as you come across the struts, you can push down, get all the air out of the struts, make sure you're slowly pushing the air out of the leading edge, and it should fold up really nice and clean for you. And one thing you'll notice is different shapes do fold up easier than others. So this RPM here has a very rectangle shape. It folds very easy. Some kites that might have a more arcing leading edge do roll a little differently, and you might have to start with a smaller fold on the wingtip or something like that. But whatever it takes to keep it as clean as possible. It doesn't have to be perfect. The goal here is to just not roll and crinkle up the kite. Alright guys, if you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe. Until next time, this has been Rygo.